At the kingdom, exactly 10 years ago, a major celestial battle took place, where a large number of holy knights from Leones were defeated at the hands of 7 traitors to the kingdom. This group of individuals is known as the Seven Sins, a band of knights committing grave sins. The main character of the story is a beer vendor named Meliodas. Despite serving delicious beer, his cooking skills are so poor that it makes people want to vomit. Because of this, Meliodas always has to bring along a pig to clean up the leftover food mess. Due to the crime of treason, the 7 deadly sins have been in exile for the past 10 years. Every time the murderers of the Holy Knights are mentioned, a sense of fear grips everyone. As people are sitting and enjoying their drinks, a warrior in armor suddenly enters Meliodas' tavern, causing them to panic and flee, thinking that this person might be one of the 7 deadly sins. However, the armor suddenly falls, revealing a young girl inside. She had fainted, so Meliodas carried her into his room for some rest. Upon waking up, the girl appeared anxious when she noticed Meliodas had a sword at his back. But Meliodas reassured her that the sword was merely a broken sword. The moment the girl spotted a talking pig named Hawk belonging to Meliodas, she became quite fascinated. Seeing that the girl seemed hungry, Meliodas treated her to one of his notoriously terrible dishes. While eating, the girl burst into tears, praising Meliodas for the delicious food, as she had gone days without eating. Right after, a group of soldiers arrived at Meliodas' tavern, suspecting the presence of the 7 deadly sins. Meliodas explained that his tavern only served leftovers from Hawk, the talking pig. However, the soldiers suddenly saw Elizabeth attempting to flee the tavern, so they quickly pursued her, thinking she might be one of the 7 deadly sins. Unexpectedly, Hawk chased after the soldiers and knocked each of them away, successfully rescuing Elizabeth. She revealed that she was seeking the 7 deadly sins to oppose the Holy Knights. After the 7 deadly sins left the kingdom, they overthrew the king, and the king himself had told her to find the 7 deadly sins to save the kingdom. However, since becoming fugitives, the group quickly disbanded. While everyone was talking, Sir Thiago suddenly attacked them. However, Meliodas managed to rescue Elizabeth just in time before getting hit by his attack. Thiago then realized that Elizabeth was the 3rd princess of the kingdom of Leones. Immediately after, Thiago swung his sword, cutting down an entire forest in an attempt to eliminate Elizabeth. Yet again, Meliodas intervened just in time to save Elizabeth from his strike, revealed to Elizabeth that he was, in fact, the leader of the 7 deadly sins. Thiago, attempting a sneak attack on Meliodas, swung his sword at him. However, Meliodas effortlessly reversed the entire attack. Fueled by his wrath, Meliodas easily repelled Thiago using only his broken sword. Right after that, Hawk's mother carried Meliodas with Meliodas' tavern to their next destination. Meliodas told Hawk's mother to take them in search of the remaining 6 members of the 7 deadly sins. When they arrived at the next location, Hawk's mother burrowed into the ground, leaving only the tavern on the surface. Meliodas stopped at Britannia to buy more beer because the beer from this place was exceptionally good. However, the rivers around the town of Britannia had stopped flowing, so they didn't have enough water to make more beer. It turned out that a boy named Mead had thrown worms into the cup of beer of a holy knight, and as a result, the knight angrily thrust his sword into the ground, sealing off the water source in the area. And the people in the town were furious, blaming Mead, so Meliodas had to take the boy back to his home. Mead explained, "Since my parents passed away, the people of the town of Britannia have taken care of me, and I've always considered the townsfolk as my extended family. So I threw worms into the cup of that holy knight because he dared to criticize the beer from this place as undrinkable." Right after, the Lion's Knights demanded the entire town to pull up a sword. If not, they would increase the taxes for the entire town tenfold. So, Mead rushed to the spot where the sword was and tried to pull it out from the town's ground. Seeing Mead's efforts, the townspeople quickly came to help the boy. However, no matter how hard they tried, the sword of the Holy Knight remained firmly in the ground. Nevertheless, to everyone's surprise, Meliodas effortlessly pulled the sword out. After the sword was removed, the water in the town returned to normal, and the people joyfully forgave Mead for the trouble he had caused. That night, everyone gathered at Meliodas' tavern to celebrate the imminent return of their ability to brew beer. Elizabeth also assisted Meliodas in serving tables at his tavern, but as a princess with royal attendants, she was somewhat out of her element. Meanwhile, the Holy Knight Gil became aware that someone had just pulled his sword out. Filled with rage, he angrily grabbed a spear infused with dark magic and launched it towards the town. However, Meliodas sensed the spear the moment it was launched. Meliodas seized Gil's thunderous spear before it could strike the town, and he promptly hurled it back towards the fortress where Gil was positioned. However, Gil managed to evade the spear just in time, narrowly avoiding being pierced. Aware that Meliodas had returned, Gil immediately led his team towards the town of Britannia to find him. Meliodas at this point is heading to the Bokmok forest to find one of the 7 deadly sins there. The Bokmok forest is a mysterious place, so ominous that even the holy knights dare not venture into it. As they enter the forest, suddenly, they see a herd of pigs identical to Hork. People couldn't distinguish which pig was the real Hork and which were imposters. They surrounded Elizabeth and transformed into a series of replicas of her. However, Meliodas instructed Elizabeth to perform a series of specific actions before leaping high into the air. The real Elizabeth hesitated to jump due to shyness, exposing the others as imposters. Meliodas attacked the fake Elizabeths and discovered that they were a group of dwarf demons. Exposed, they ran towards a giant girl who was sleeping, seeking help. The giant girl turned out to be the sin of envy, Britannia, a member of the 7 deadly sins. She expressed great joy at seeing her former leader, Meliodas. In the past, Britannia had a penchant for eating whole pigs, so when she saw Hork, she immediately decided to roast him for a feast. However, upon learning that Meliodas was accompanied by a beautiful girl like Elizabeth, Britannia felt a surge of jealousy and gave Meliodas a beating for being flirtatious. Shortly afterward, Meliodas explained that Elizabeth was on a quest to find the 7 deadly sins. Understanding the situation, Britannia agreed to join them and provide her support. Suddenly, a few lightning bolts struck down from the sky, binding everyone in place. The one responsible for the thunderous attack was none other than the Holy Knight Gil. Elizabeth immediately recognized Gil as he used to be her close friend. Gil had undergone a change in personality since his father was killed by the 7 deadly sins. However, Meliodas revealed that Gil's father, the former captain of the Holy Knights, was murdered by someone else. The Holy Knights at the time wrongly blamed the 7 deadly sins, leading to a conflict and their eventual betrayal. Despite Meliodas's explanation, Gil remained unconvinced. To settle the dispute, Meliodas decided to untie himself and engage in combat with Gil. However, Gil managed to knock Meliodas down and used a thunder sword slash to strike him. To everyone's surprise, Meliodas suddenly stood up, as the attack wasn't enough to defeat him. Gil attempted to continue his assault on Meliodas, but despite his efforts, he couldn't land a hit. Britannia grabbed hold of Gil and threw him out of the Bokmok forest. The enraged piglet Hork demanded to find Gil and engage in a fight with him. Gil fell near a nearby town, causing harm to the residents. Meliodas's group continued their journey to find other members of the 7 deadly sins, with their next target being Ban, the sin of greed, who was imprisoned in Base Dungeon. However, Meliodas suddenly collapsed due to the earlier injury inflicted by Gil. Meanwhile, the 4 holy knights at Base Dungeon had anticipated their plans, so they reinforced the guard with additional soldiers to tighten security around Ban. Britannia brought Meliodas to a town near the prison to find a doctor, but the townspeople were frightened by her gigantic appearance. Elizabeth and Hork had to venture out on their own to find a doctor for Meliodas and ease the fears of the locals. Britannia reminisced, "Since leaving my homeland, I've traveled the world, and knights would often try to stop me, thinking I was a loathsome giant monster. At that time, Meliodas appeared and protected me, treating me like a young woman. From that moment, I fell in love with Meliodas." Britannia felt a sense of regret for not having a petite body like Elizabeth's, because she desired to enter houses and take care of her loved one. While everyone was chatting, they suddenly saw a swarm of beetles approaching. The beetles sprayed corrosive acid, causing the town to quickly descend into chaos. The one controlling the swarm was a female holy knight in pink armor from Base Dungeon. Britannia created massive pillars rising from the ground to counter the attack. She immediately ran straight towards base dungeon to find the female holy knight in pink armor. When they returned to the infirmary, Elizabeth was horrified to discover that Dr. Dana had given Minos poison instead of medicine. Right after that, a holy knight named Golgius suddenly appeared in the middle of the room. He kidnapped Dr. Dana's daughter to force him to comply with his orders. In the prison, Ban heard the news that Meliodas was coming to rescue him from the guards. Ban decided to break out of prison himself because, in reality, he had only pretended to be imprisoned for amusement. A holy knight named Jericho immediately appeared to stop him from escaping, but Jericho could do nothing to Ban. She only ended up cutting his hair to make him look more handsome. Golgius struggled to take the broken sword from Meliodas while he was unconscious. However, Meliodas suddenly woke up with a strange mark on his forehead, and his body emitted an incredibly powerful force that frightened Golgius. In fear, Golgius returned the sword to Meliodas and quickly fled. Everyone was surprised to see that Meliodas' wound had completely healed. As Golgius tried to find a way out of the town, Meliodas' group intercepted him. Dr. Dana chased after him, pleading for the return of his daughter. But Golgius suddenly appeared from behind and struck him down. Golgius then attacked Meliodas again, but after a few exchanges, Meliodas managed to defeat him and ran into a building. Once inside, Meliodas set up a trap at the entrance to prevent Golgius from following. As Golgius entered the building, he fell into the trap in an instant. Meliodas discovered that Golgius could vanish and reappear using his invisibility. Despite Golgius's attempt to escape, Meliodas unleashed an overwhelming attack that Golgius couldn't withstand. However, Golgius utilized his invisibility and quickly mounted a horse to escape. Afterward, Elizabeth hurried back to Dr. Dana to assist him with medical care. Finally, Meliodas, accompanied by Elizabeth, set out to the based prison to rescue Ban. On their way, they encountered Dionea returning from the prison. Suddenly, Dionea perceived Meliodas as a masked knight and launched a frenzied attack on him. Meliodas evaded Dionea's pursuit and successfully rescued 2 sheepherds. Meliodas also observed Dionea transforming into the masked knight, leading to an intense and chaotic battle between them.